referring
the date,
to it as sort
June
of a main
16th,
squeeze.
A boyfriend?
2007.
Well, they're married.
Driving
but
back
it's a
to
main
dinner
squeeze.
with Paul.
I would say in the realm
Michael.
of the world, Ed is company, David was alive.
Bev.
Well, I don't.
Angela.
Who am I going to be buried next to? This is like,
Talking
it's
about
my first husband,
family.
my second, or my third husband.
Well, at the moment, you have only one choice.
I don't know.
You can work on it.
Well, would you
but
be buried next to Paul?
No, I'm not buried next to Paul.
You're not going to get buried next to
No,
Paul?
because Marty and Paul are buried next to each other. I
Oh.
already know that. That was slated before Bev met Paul.
This is a whole fascinating discsion.
Well, it's,
Yeah.
you know,
So will you be
I mean,
buried
put it this
next
way.
to your
I would hope
first
that
husband or your second husband?
neither
No.
No. He's not even like a consideration. Gotcha.
He's a good for nothing bastard. Or is that
Well, he's my
overstated?
children's father.
Oh, it's true, but what does it have to do with the first statement?
Well, I wouldn't put it in that
Okay.
end of the.
My
you know,
apologies, that's
Yeah.
drinks.
Yeah, I think he's just not somebody that I wanted to spend the rest of my life with, and there's a lot of things I wouldn't.
Or death with. Okay.
Yeah, and I would not be buried next to with him.
I should have turned there. Okay.
And my second husband, Rob,
Here.
Oh,
is
yeah,
in
yeah,
Port
yeah,
Angeles,
thank you.
and his
I mean,
act-
Likely people to visit me in the future might be my children. So they might as well visit their parents.
Well, can I tell you know something? Like I have like an issue with sort of going to cemeteries. So if you should die before me, which I may not. Yeah, I mean I may not visit you frequently.
That's
Yeah.
okay. And I that's for each person to decide. But my own sense is I should at least not create that excuse for my children that they don't want to go visit dad because then they have to go visit mom and so on. So at least I've removed that excuse from them.
Yeah.
Well, can I speak personal?
Sure.
My father's immortality is my memory of him. I've never felt a strong emotional thing about visiting the grave. I mean, I just, and I think that's apparent in my behavior. I think that
Well, Portland's not exactly on the main track either.
well, but the second,
Both.
the first part of it, which is that his memory still lives in my brain and is, if not determining, then at least very important in terms of my actions, is a measure of his immortality. Also, I think should be apparent from my life. Whether it is that I've positioned myself in opposition to him or in concert with him.
Yeah, and that's, everybody has to decide for themselves how they want to deal with these matters. And it's fine.
Do you and David figure out where you're going to be?
No. I could be buried next to you, hon. No, that's too close. That's like up the nose. Because we're getting this on video camera. No, but we think we'd want it to be somewhere in Northern California. That narrows it down for y'all.
That's where your home is. That makes sense.
But not where my mom and dad will be buried. That seems weird.
Yeah, it is. It's separate. You're separated from that. So where's your dad buried?
Dad's buried in San Jose.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
And Mom, Helen has a space there.
Yep, she's got her little space. Yeah, and I don't go back. My sister goes back. I haven't visited my dad's grave for, I don't know, 20 some years.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe longer.
We should bring the Roo dog.
I thought about that, and I don't know.
So Reese is not going to be tomorrow?
She's not gonna what?
She's going to be there tomorrow?
Oh, tomorrow. But I thought you meant to go visit my dad.
That's what
That's
I
what he
meant.
meant. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think we'd ever take her to visit Marty either. I mean, I'm not opposed or.
No, we'll take her to visit Marty.
All right. Maybe when she's old enough to sort of understand all the relations.
Josh has lost.
But when it's not meaningful because you don't know the person, I mean, it's just sort of
Well,
okay,
it'll be another park to run around tomorrow.
I think it's really
Exactly.
important to introduce kids early. I mean, Josh is 10 and he lost Crystal's mom, his mom's mom. And we're sitting at breakfast one morning and he said to Elisa, how many people have you lost in your life? You know, he's significant to children when they lose that elder parent. And everybody sort of stopped cutting their breakfast and said, Lisa said, oh, let me stop and think. I have to tell you how many people I've lost in my life. So it's part of, death is a part of life. It's a good thing to...
Bev, am I parking the car or are we hitting the town? If
Introduce
whoever
them.
wants to join us.
I don't know where to go, honey, so I'm not up to wandering.
You're not up to wandering?
I am not up to wandering. We did that once in Portland. That was enough.
Okay.
It's big enough that once is
Oh
enough.
my goodness, we did this trek trying to find some
we
jazz.
had
It was
sort of
like
a-
it was incredible. We drove.
And once Paul's hell bent on finding
Oh,
jazz,
God.
you're probably like,
Then he goes to New
"Oh."
Orleans.
No, it just was nuts. So we went up by where you were today. I mean, Peter or Paul, Michael up at
Peter, Paul, and Michael.
Mary. Up at the up by Veterans. It was up by the university. We drove all the way back up there for some jazz, and then we got up there and we walked down the stairs, and it was empty. They said, "Oh yeah, no, we don't have jazz tonight," and it was touted as one of the best places. So then we drove to another place, which was a total dive, and then we drove back.
I'm gonna...
Okay.
Happy Father's Day.
Well, thank you very much. Can I get a kiss too for Father's Day?
I
Okay.
need to cut all by myself.
Well-
I need to cut all by myself.
Thank you. That's beautiful.
It has bugs and a bird and birthday stuff.
Bugs and birds and birthday stuff.
And even a hot dog.
A hot dog
And a,
for
bu-
fun
and a balloon.
and a balloon. Well, that must be. It's a special day. Huh? How about another kiss? Do I get another kiss for Father's Day? Mwah. Thank you very much.
Good morning.
Grandpa, don't be silly.
Wait a minute
Reese,
now.
that's Iwana.
Just a sec here. We're going
You
to
say
try
good morning?
to avoid.
Grandpa.
Yeah, you can have that and this. How's that? Then you can draw a picture. Put it on the floor. Okay? Can we put it on the floor? The orange juice is very good. It might even be fresh. Good.
He's gonna open his present.
Yeah, I'm just gonna get a little juice. This juice is really good. Would you like a little juice?
No, I know my own.
Or you have your own juice? Okay.
That was a good dinner last night.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, both of you young ladies.
Thanks for tolerating my incessant questioning.
All right, let's see.
No, I'm
That's
a fan of
That's the
questions.
card
Can
you
I see
made.
your card? Can you show Beth? Thank you.
Good.
Oh, very nice. And it has a hot dog and an ice cream cone and a caramel apple and a sour caterpillar. Very nice.
Look at this. There's a hint of people here.
Oh, look at
Can
that.
you give me your fork?
You can open the wrap.
Okay, well, I'm just gonna use the fork.
I got a fresh one for him.
Yeah, thank you. Go outside. Go outside. Mommy, I'll be look at that. Who is that?
Grandpa.
It is. And who else is there?
Grandpa's.
Oh, that is so cute. What a cute idea.
What is it? Let me see.
My notepad picture.
Yeah.
It says grandpa on it?
Look at that.
Oh, that's fabulous.
Clever.
Oh, that is so sweet. Speaking of which, there
Dad
are some really good
and
pictures.
Grandpa and Reese and Josh.
size and it's nice. I even have my siblings
Oh,
over there.
look at that.
Siblings. So I don't have any
Who's that?
of my brothers,
That's right.
sister.
There's the Harvard Varsity Club Hall of Fame.
I screwed that up, but.
Wow.
Oh, that's very cool. Oh. Where's that from?
Where's that from?
That was in early May when David was inducted into the Harvard Varsity Club Hall of Fame.
Very
Inducted, not
nice.
cited.
Not invited, inducted.
So,
That's really cool, David. Very cool Father's Day presents.
that is very cool. How sweet. What do you want, sweetie? You gonna count?
See, we're standing there 15 seconds for pictures. David was in his limited number of opportunities for pictures.
What's up there? That's great. That's very cool book that we. There's you. Do you see those pictures? No, where?
Vicky, you came out great.
Let me see. Let's look at our pictures.
Cool. Now, David, how do you get inducted into
would you
the
like-
Varsity Club Hall of Fame?
Okay, we'll just leave it here.
Is anybody who is a varsity member who makes it 10 years out, or?
Huh? No, it's
Good morning.
for stellar athletic performances.
Good morning, Reese.
I mean, we won the national championship and we're undefeated, so, but it's, I'm sure it's half a
This
fundraising
picture,
thing.
this picture here is scary, and you know exactly why.
Oh.
Reese, are you gonna look at it too?
Is that scary or what?
Yes, well,
It is scary.
Bev saw the photo op. She sent the photographer over there.
I mean, it's really scary. It's like.
What is scary?
superimposed.
What is scary?
There's a picture here that looks like exactly like.
That's not, I mean, I think, where, which one?
I mean,
I even touched it because I wanted.
down to the double chin.
Where, show me. I think you have many that.
Many double chins? There are pictures of my dad working that look like,
Now, Peter, I told Vicki when we were out at the restaurant, you know, you're, particularly when you're a little tired, you have looks and manners.
Here we have Gigi and Grandpa Paul,
Where's the money?
and here we have my
Very cool.
great-grandparents,
Where did Daddy go?
Isabel Kaufman and Leopold Kaufman. And here we have Grandpa Paul, Paul Weiden, and Grandma Semmel, Grandpa Paul's mother.
We're going to go on a little driving tour of Portland. Most likely, the first thing we'll pass is the Belcourt, which is the apartment house that Grandma and Grandpa Kaufman bought in the 1930s when they moved to Portland, and was their major source of support, basically until my mother and Uncle Vernon sold it after Gigi died. So Grandpa Kaufman brought $50,000, was able to get $50,000 out of Germany in the 1930s, and he used that to buy the Belcourt. As far as I know, without a mortgage, but I really don't know. But anyway, they lived on the income from that for the next, well, basically till Grandma Kaufman died in 1980. So that's the first stop. It still looks pretty much like it did when I first saw it. I don't know whether the inside's been revised, but remodeled or upgraded, but the outside certainly hasn't, at least not visibly. And then,
Did they live in it?
they never lived in it as a couple. After Grandpa Kaufman died, Grandma Kaufman took over a couple of units on the top floor and converted it into a very nice one-bedroom apartment for herself. So then she lived in it from the early 60s, which is when Grandpa Kaufman died in 1959, So she lived in it from the early 60s until she died in 1980, except that she lived more and more in California with my mother. So, that's the Belcourt. Then we're going to go, if I get the streets right, the next place we'll pass is the first real apartment that Gigi and Grandpa Paul had together. Very nice apartment, and across from them were 4 older people, 2 men and 2 women who were not married to each other. And I always knew them as the neighbors. And the neighbors were very instrumental in teaching Gigi how to cook and keep house and so on, because as the daughter of a wealthy person in Germany, they always had servants, so she didn't know how to cook or clean or do the wash or anything like that. And the neighbors taught her how to do that. And by the time I knew them in the 1950s, when I remember them, they were all in their 80s, but they were very lovely, loving people. And they had the apartment across the hall from Gigi and Grandpa Paul. So we'll try to see that one. And then a little down the street is another apartment house where they had an attic apartment for a few months, which was a transition between the attic room they had where Grandma and Grandpa Kaufman lived and the apartment where the neighbors were. And then, if I get it right, we'll turn the corner and we'll see the apartment building where Grandma and Grandpa Kaufman lived. And that was a very nice, very large 2-bedroom apartment. And it had an attic. There were 4 units in the building, and each of them had a room in the attic. And that's where Gigi and Grandpa Paul lived at the very beginning. And that's where I used to stay, usually with Gigi when I went to visit Grandma and Grandpa Kaufman.
Where did Grandma Semmel live?
Grandma Semmel lived in the middle building, the one where I think it was in the same building where Gigi and Grandpa Paul had an apartment on the top. So all these are within a block of each other, easy walking distance.
And did Grandma Semmel come at this? Did everyone come at the same time?
As far as I know, they all came like 1936, 37, but I'm not really sure when everybody came. But that's my recollection. And the way they got here actually is that Grandma Semmel had a nephew, if I remember this right, who lived in Chicago. And he's the one who, so like a cousin of Grandpa Paul, something like that, lived in Chicago. And he's the one that, you had to have a sponsor to get to the United States. And he sponsored Gigi and Grandpa Paul immigrating to the United States. So, and I think Grandma Semmel stayed briefly in Chicago and then moved to Portland. So basically,
It says, "Dear Mama,
my parents, I'm
thank you for taking
almost
such
certain,
good care of me."
moved to Portland in 1936, and I have a feeling it was 36, 37, maybe 38, that the others arrived. And here is Reese arriving. Thank you very much. So that's the story and the pre-narrative of the places we'll go see shortly.
Okay. Okay. So what do you tell us what you remember about various grandparents? Your grandparents, my great-grandparents, and Reese's great-great-grandparents.
Well, Grandma Semmel died when I was 12 or 13, and I remember her as a very kind, sweet, but old lady. She spoke some English, but certainly wasn't fluent in English, so our conversations were somewhat limited. by language and generations and so on. And I didn't see her that much, but she was always very loving and supportive and grandmotherly.
Did you and she speak English or German?
No, we spoke English because when everybody moved here, but particularly my parents, when I was born, it was 1941, and we just declared war, or were about to declare war with Germany, and they felt it was very important that, first of all, they learn to speak English better, and second of all, that I speak English so that I was an American, not a German, at a time we were at war with Germany. And so they would speak, and particularly the grandparents would speak mostly when they were speaking to each other in German, and I picked up some German, but I never really learned it. Certainly was never able to speak it. Later on, when I went to high school, I took German, and then I could speak some, but never fluent. So, meanwhile, then my grandmother, Grandma Kaufman, was an extremely bright, capable, energetic, enthusiastic, always optimistic woman, whom my father, who was a very critical judge of people, rarely spoke highly of people. He spoke always very highly of her. My father spoke very highly of Grandma Kaufman as extremely intelligent and insightful and so on. And that certainly is true, though obviously there was a large number of years between us. But anyway, she was a very active grandparent. Took me to the zoo, took care of me, we went places together. She was very clever. Today, she would clearly have been the head of the family in that time, and given their background, it was very important that her husband appear to be in charge of everything. And so one of her great skills was to make it appear to everyone, particularly to Grandpa Kaufman, that he was making all the decisions when in fact she was. So she was a good cook. She was a very devoted parent and grandparent, and particularly as she lived more and more with my mother, I certainly knew her very well the last 20, 30 years, 28 years of her life. Grandpa Kaufman, and Grandma Kaufman became fluent in English, and although she always spoke with an accent, was certainly not at all limited in her ability to speak English. Grandpa Kaufman learned English. He could kind of do table conversation, grandfather kind of conversation, but was never comfortable in English, never really totally fluent. And whenever he would discuss business with my mother and Uncle Vernon and my father and Grandma Kaufman, for example, it was always in German. So, and he was, again, he died the year I went to college, so he died just within a week of my first days at Harvard. His death was expected because he'd been operated on a few months before and found to have inoperable cancer. But it was very important to him and to my grandmother that my Harvard career was not interrupted, and so he specifically requested that I not come to his funeral. But I remember him as, very grandfatherly, very loving. And one of the stories that I remember that I think reflects, he was kosher. He kept a kosher home. But during the war, he stood in line to get bacon rations for his grandson. so that his grandson could get enough calories and nutrition. So he was willing to do things for me that were not truly within his realm. And what I do remember most from him is the importance of religion and his Jewish faith. And I remember going to temple with him, his showing me how to put on a yarmulke and the talit, and the talis, and to put on the phylacteries, which he did every morning. That's the little prayer boxes that a Jew is supposed to put on every morning on his arm and on his forehead. Remember the prayer for frontlets between thine eyes. And he did that every morning, and he was very important for him at the time of my bar mitzvah to show me how to do that, and I remember his doing that. And I remember very much the importance of his faith and of his culture and the practice of religion. And that's the basis of my, to the extent that I do practice, and to the extent that those things are important to him, they largely reflect the memories and influence of him.
Did they ever talk about their parents and grandparents?
No. Not really. He talked occasionally. I can remember my grandfather talking about his service for Germany during the First World War. But I really don't remember them ever talking much about Germany or their background. This was not a fond memory for them, and they lived in the present and the future and didn't look back. And I think if you can understand the wrenching difficulty of being a wealthy, established German first, Jew second, and then suddenly thrown out of your country and forced to leave, and by chance really not ending up killed in a Nazi death camp. I mean, it's very hard for us to relate to that trauma and psychological state of mind, but it was my grandparents, for example, who did travel a lot in the 50s, together never went back to Germany. My grandfather never wanted to go back. And I don't remember whether Grandma Kaufman eventually went back or not, but if she did, it was much later.
Did Gigi and Uncle Vernon go to Germany?
I don't know about Uncle Vernon. Gigi did. She took me to Germany when I was 14 and showed me Frankfurt and some of the areas around there, which in 1955, Frankfurt was basically a city of rubble. It was still completely devastated by the Allied bombing.
Did you go to where she grew up?
We grew to where she grew up, but it was just a street of rubble. And what I do remember is she took us to their country home, which they went to frequently, called the Brandhof, which in 1955 was a country restaurant. And I wish I knew where that was now. It's somewhere in the environs of Frankfurt. And that was still in existence, but converted from a luxury suburban vacation home to a country restaurant. So my mother was willing to go back. My father went back extensively. But my grandparents wanted to put that part of their life behind them and not revisit the trauma that all of that was for them.
Okay. Well, to be continued. What are we looking at here?
This is the Bell Court. This is the 30-odd unit apartment house that Grandma and Grandpa Kaufman bought, and in the last years of her life, Grandpa Kaufman lived on the front top right. So,
When did they sell the building?
after my grandmother died, which we decided is the early 80s, a year or two later, my mother and uncle, who owned it then, sold it, because Uncle Vernon needed the money. And I mean, it was silly.
Sounds familiar.
It was going to be it seems to me the people they sold it to were going to redevelop it, and obviously there's this beautiful piece of land. I mean, but I guess in the end the economics didn't pay.
Seems like it will over time.
Yeah. I mean, obviously there's a new building going up there, and that one's new. And how do you get one of those? Okay. Go in one bit.
Address of where the Belcourt is for posterity's sake?
I don't know.
Well, like
Well-
what are the cross streets?
Well, the main street we drove up was Burnside, and I'd have to look where we turned. We can look it up. But now we're on Northrop Way, which is one of the street. I couldn't remember the name of the street. This is Northrop Way, and I would say I'm 95% certain that where that red couch is the first apartment, real apartment.
What red couch?
See in the window? There's a red
behind the tree.
That's the first apartment that Gigi and Grandpa Paul had.
Take a picture of you in front of the apartment.
Okay, go take a picture of all of us.
Okay, go back.
So what do you think this
Come on,
is? This was,
brothers, dear.
this was the first apartment that who had?
Gigi and Grandpa Paul had, previously they had just had kind of attic rooms, and this was a real apartment. And this is where Gigi learned how to cook and do the wash and
need Peter
etc. And because across the hall, where now all those carnations and flower boxes are, that's where the neighbors lived. And that was this two men and two women who weren't couples or something. And they sort of
couples.
well, it's not an attic room, which was when, and then we're going to go up to 25th, and we're going to turn the corner, and that's where Grandma and Grandpa Kaufman lived, and where the first place that Gigi and Grandpa Paul were. And it's, you can sort of see, it's sort of that gray building. So we'll turn and point then. We won't all get out of the car. And as I say, Gigi and Grandpa Paul lived first there for, I don't know, some part of a year in the attic above.
What year was that?
36. That's when they came. So they lived in the attic of the apartment building where her parents were living. And then they got enough independence and probably enough money to get an attic room in one of these buildings. And then a little while later, they moved into there. And her window up there was the one that belonged to Grandma and Grandpa Kaufman, and that's where Gigi and I used to stay when I would visit them.
Wasn't it like an entire house? Separate.
This was where Grandpa Paul's memorial service was, that I remember. I was about 12, right at 13, I guess.
Over here.
Lynn and Rory.
Reese.
Another great grandmother
Hey, Reese, come over here.
No,
You know, this is her great-great-grandmother.
that's right.
Now, when
We're married.
I never really heard that full story, other than it wasn't a happy.
That's what we're talking about.
Who's Niemeyer?
Niemeyer means born Meyer. So you'll see that in a lot of them.
Is this sacrilegious?
Sure, but
I think
that's okay. We're making the religion here, so.
Here, you want to get up too?
Here, let me lift Reese.
Yeah, this is a framer. Right. Oh yeah, Isabella. See, Isabella.
Reese, this is your great-great-grandmother, and you're named Reese Isabel Weiden, and she's named Isabella.
There's your name.
That's mine.
That's
She
your
was
name.
a neat
That's where
lady.
your name came from.
And who is this?
That's who's there.
That's who's
Isabella.
there. Isabella Kaufman.
Isabella Kelsey.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so we have a physical monument. And what we remember and what we're attached to is that which is not physical. That's which is beyond physicality and, you know, is in a different realm. And all of our memories of childhood and memories of her as a mother and memories of who she was to us. And, you know, we can do our best with physical monuments, but really that's in a realm that's eternal, that's beyond space and time. And this gives a marker to that. It gives a place to kind of connect us to that.
I think on the day, which is Father's Day, it seems to me appropriate to remember her both as a mother, which she certainly was to me, but also as a daughter. She certainly was a very devoted daughter to her parents when they were both alive, and then particularly to her mother in the last 20, 25 years of her mother's life. And so I hopefully have learned from her those lessons, both how to be a good parent and a good child, and hope that I've been able to pass some of that on to my children and through them to their children, so they, all of the generations to come, can both be good parents and good children. And that's, I think, sort of the fitting legacy on, it's not Mother's Day, but it's Father's Day, so we can call it Parents' Day. And it seems an appropriate time to remember her focus, not on the big family. She was not one who was interested in the cousins and distant family, but she certainly was focused on the immediate family. And to some extent, those traditions have gone on, and that's why it's great that all of you are here to celebrate this day with her and with me and with us.
We were children of another marriage, and yet, speaking for myself, and I believe speaking for Peter, Gerda extended unending generosity and warmth to us. I always felt at home in her place. She was a very important part of my life, and that is a remarkable statement.
Monica?
And there's, I mean, it has to do again with marking a monument. I mean, this whole idea comes from in the Torah when people have deceased. It actually says that they put up a pillar of stone, and so that's why we actually have these stones. And so that's a continuation of that. Now, the real reason I think is because you look around here, right? It looks like no one's here except us today, right? And that's not true. I mean, if you came an hour earlier, there was someone walking around, you know, paying their respects to someone, to their mother or to their father on Father's Day. And so you can kind of look around, you can kind of see, oh, you know, this isn't such a cold place. You know, someone was right over there not too long ago, because there's stones there. They would have blown away in the storm like last week. You know, someone just came over there, someone just came over there. And then if you come to visit your own loved one and you see a stone on there, you say, oh, you know, someone was here. I think it just kind of brings a little bit of life to a place that can seem so desolate at times. And there's a number of different, you know, it also says that 1/60th, or I'm not sure if it's 1/60th, but according to the tradition, a very small fraction of the soul remains at the gravesite. And so by marking with a stone, there's some mystical interpretations about the stone and the soul. I'm not quite entirely sure, but in Judaism,
Have to
it's
take
you
a
get
sabbatical
interpretations
and
after
Hasidic
interpretations.